For thousands of years, the aliens had vanished from Earth, leaving behind nothing but memories and legends. Earth had changed in ways they could never imagine. The cities that once stood tall with the marvels of alien technology were now buried under layers of dust and time. The world had become a place of mystery, untouched by the beings who had once ruled it. But now, after 30,000 years, the long-awaited return of the aliens was imminent. In the vastness of space, their ships drifted through the darkness, their destination clear. Earth. It was the planet that had once been their home, and they were coming back to reclaim what was theirs. The ancient empire that had once thrived here had been torn apart by battles, betrayals, and ultimately, a devastating war. The aliens had left before the final blow was struck, abandoning their prized ship and technology to those who would never truly understand its power. The journey had taken them across the stars, from one galaxy to the next, across many worlds. The aliens had watched as civilizations rose and fell, but Earth had always called to them. It was their past, their legacy. It was time for them to return and take back what had been lost. But they knew that nothing would be the same. The Earth they remembered had long since crumbled under the weight of its own people. The cities that had once glittered with the light of alien technology were now ruins. Nature had reclaimed the land, and humanity had risen and fallen many times. Who were the people now? What had become of the humans they had once studied, shaped, and ruled? The aliens sat in their ships, staring out into the endless void, lost in their thoughts. Some wondered if they would be welcomed back. Others feared that the humans they had once known were no more. Could they find their ship? Would it still be intact, or would it be lost forever, buried beneath the ruins of a forgotten world? As the ships neared Earth, a strange sense of unease filled the air. The universe was vast, and space was cold and silent. But as they entered Earth's atmosphere, everything felt different. The stars outside their ships seemed to fade into nothingness, as if Earth itself was calling to them. The planet below was dark, its surface covered in patches of light and shadow. The signs of life were faint, and the cities they had once known were now little more than ghostly outlines in the distance. The aliens were nervous. Their mission was clear, but the uncertainty of what they would find weighed heavily on their minds. They had spent centuries preparing for this moment, and now they were here. But how would they find the planet they had once known? What had happened to their ship? Was it still here, waiting for them? The ships began their descent, cutting through the clouds as they made their way to the surface. The once glorious cities now lay in ruins, their structures crumbling under the weight of time. In the distance, they could see the remains of what might have been their last battle. Buildings were twisted and broken, their foundations shattered by the wars that had consumed the world long ago. As the ships landed, a strange silence hung in the air. The aliens disembarked cautiously, stepping onto the Earth they had once ruled. The ground beneath their feet was unfamiliar, overgrown with vegetation and dust. There was no sign of the humans they had once encountered, no trace of the great empire they had built. It was as if the Earth had forgotten them entirely. The aliens looked around, uncertain of where to begin their search. The ruins stretched out before them, vast and empty. Where had their ship been left? Had it been destroyed? Or had it been hidden away, waiting for their return? They walked through the city, their footsteps echoing in the emptiness. The buildings were broken and twisted, their walls covered in vines and moss. The air was thick with the scent of decay, and the sky above was a dull gray, as if the world itself had lost its color over the years. But then something caught their eye. In the distance, they saw a faint glimmer, a flash of light that seemed to come from beneath the ruins. It was almost like a beacon calling them toward it. The aliens' hearts raced with excitement and fear. Could this be it? Was this the place where their ship had been hidden? They moved quickly, making their way toward the light. The closer they got, the more they could feel the weight of history pressing down on them. This was the moment they had waited for, the moment they would reclaim what had been lost. As they reached the source of the light, they found something unexpected. Beneath the ruins of an ancient building, half buried in the dirt and rubble, was a doorway. It was old, covered in strange symbols, but it was unmistakable. This was the entrance to their ship, their lost treasure, the key to their past. The aliens stood there for a moment, staring at the doorway. It had been so long. So many years had passed. But now, at last, they were standing at the threshold of their future. The ship was within reach. All they had to do was open the door and claim what was theirs. But as they stepped forward, a strange feeling washed over them. Something wasn't right. The door seemed to hum with energy, and the air around them grew colder. The silence of the earth was now oppressive, as if the planet itself was holding its breath. The aliens exchanged uneasy glances. They had no idea what lay beyond that door, but they knew one thing for certain. This was just the beginning of something much larger than they could have ever imagined. With one last look at the ruins of the earth they had once known, they pushed open the door and stepped into the unknown. The journey to Earth had taken millennia, but now, as their ships touched down on the forgotten world, the aliens could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on them. They had always known that returning to Earth would be complicated, but nothing could have prepared them for the reality they now faced. The planet had changed beyond recognition, and the once vibrant cities that they had left behind were now no more than ruins, their glory fading with time. As the ships descended through the atmosphere, the alien crew members watched anxiously. They knew they had come for something important, something that had been hidden here for centuries, but they didn't know what to expect. The Earth they remembered, a thriving planet full of advanced technology and bustling cities, had become a land of silence and mystery. The sky above was overcast, and patches of land were barely visible beneath thick clouds. Everything seemed desolate. Was it still the same Earth, or had something more devastating happened to the planet in their absence? The ships landed slowly, the engines humming softly as they touched the ground. The air was heavy, almost thick, as the aliens stepped out and looked around. The planet's surface seemed to have changed, as if nature itself had taken control of the land. Tall grass and vines overtook the remnants of what might have once been a thriving city. Large, crumbling buildings stood like broken skeletons of their former selves, covered in moss and ivy. The world was quiet, but it was a strange kind of quiet, one that felt almost unnatural. It was as if the earth had been abandoned by time itself. They moved cautiously, unsure of what they would find. Their long history with Earth had taught them many things, but there was no guide to what lay ahead. Their mission was simple: recover the lost ship and supplies that had been left behind, relics of a time when their civilization had reigned supreme. But as they walked through the streets of the city, they saw no signs of the humans they once knew. The place was eerily empty, with no sign of life, nothing but the overgrown ruins that surrounded them. The aliens had left Earth when their empire had collapsed, torn apart by wars and political turmoil. They had fled before the final conflict, taking with them their most precious possessions, items of technology and knowledge that had been stored aboard their great ship. That ship, the one that had carried them across the stars, had been left behind on Earth when they made their hasty departure. It had been hidden away, buried deep within the city. It had been waiting for them to return, waiting for the aliens to come back and reclaim it. But what had happened to the ship? Was it still hidden beneath the rubble, just waiting to be rediscovered? The aliens didn't know. All they could do was search and hope. They didn't even know if the humans who had once lived here were still alive, or if the planet was truly abandoned. The sky overhead was thick with clouds, and the sun barely broke through the haze, casting a dim light on the city's ruins. The team split up to search for any signs of their lost ship. One of the aliens led the way through the broken streets, careful to avoid the fallen debris and cracked pavement. As they moved, they couldn't help but notice the signs of time's passing. What had once been grand structures were now in ruins, their walls cracked and crumbling. The once gleaming towers, which had stood as symbols of power and advancement, now seemed like ghosts of a forgotten era. The feeling of desolation was overwhelming. Had they been wrong to return? Could they ever truly reclaim what had been lost? But then, as they turned a corner, they saw something that made their hearts race, a faint light glowing in the distance. At first it was nothing more than a shimmer, a brief flash that could have been the reflection of the dying sun. But as they got closer, the light grew brighter, and the outline of a structure began to take shape. It was a building, but unlike any they had seen before. The architecture was strange, different from anything they had known. There were no signs of decay here, no vines creeping up the sides, no cracks in the stone. It stood untouched, as if it had been waiting for them all along. Could this be it? Could this be the entrance to the place they had been searching for all these years? They approached with caution, every step filled with uncertainty. The light seemed to be coming from beneath the building, shining through a small crack in the ground. The ground was solid here, no sign of shifting earth or collapsing ruins. The structure seemed out of place, almost as if it didn't belong to the rest of the city. It was as if it had been preserved, hidden away from the ravages of time. The alien leader knelt down and examined the crack carefully. His fingers brushed against the cool surface of the stone, feeling for any hidden mechanism. Slowly, he pushed against the stone, and with a soft rumble, a section of the ground began to shift. The earth trembled slightly as a doorway appeared beneath them, revealing a set of ancient stairs leading down into the depths. The aliens exchanged uncertain glances, unsure if they should continue. This was it, the moment they had waited for, the entrance to their lost ship. But something about the situation felt wrong. The air was heavy, charged with an energy they couldn't quite understand. The door had opened with ease, but the feeling of being watched lingered. Were they truly alone? Still, they pressed on, stepping cautiously onto the stairs that led them down into the darkness. As they descended, the air grew cooler, and the faint smell of metal and dust filled their noses. The walls were smooth, almost too smooth, and the faintest hum of energy seemed to vibrate through the air. The deeper they went, the more they could feel the presence of something ancient, something far older than they could have imagined. At the bottom of the stairs, they reached a large chamber. The walls were lined with strange markings, symbols they didn't understand. In the center of the room stood a massive structure, a ship unlike any they had ever seen. It was their ship, the one they had left behind, but it had changed. It looked different, almost as if it had been altered by something or someone. The aliens stood in awe, staring at the ship. This was it. This was what they had come for. But as they stepped forward, a sudden chill swept through the room, and the strange humming grew louder. The ship seemed to come to life, its lights flickering on as if it had been waiting for them. The aliens knew they had reached their destination, but they also knew that something was not right. This was no ordinary ship. It held secrets they couldn't yet understand, and it was clear that their journey had only just begun. As the aliens stood in the vast, silent chamber, staring at the ship that had once been the heart of their empire, they felt an overwhelming sense of awe. It was unlike anything they had ever seen before, even in their most ancient texts and records. The ship had been hidden away on Earth for millennia, yet it seemed to hum with life, as though it had been waiting for them to return. The energy that filled the air was both familiar and alien, a strange mix that made the atmosphere thick with anticipation. The aliens knew they had discovered something important, something that held the answers to many of their questions. But as they moved closer, a sense of unease crept into their hearts. The ship, once a symbol of their power, was now a mystery. Its surface shimmered with an iridescent glow, but the patterns that danced across it were unfamiliar. It was as though the ship had evolved, adapting over the years, its technology reshaped by the passage of time. What had happened to it? Had someone, or something, altered it while they were away? One of the aliens, the chief engineer of their group, stepped forward, drawn to the ship's pulsing light. He reached out, his hand trembling slightly as he touched the surface. The moment his fingers made contact, the ship responded. A low hum echoed through the chamber, and the lights inside the ship flickered on. The walls of the chamber seemed to shift, and a soft glow illuminated the pathway that led into the ship's core. The crew members exchanged uncertain glances, their minds filled with questions. This was the moment they had waited for. They had traveled across the stars, through time and space, to reclaim their lost heritage. But now that they had found it, they weren't sure how to proceed. Was it truly safe to board the ship? Was it still their ship, or had it become something else entirely? Despite their doubts, the engineer motioned for the others to follow him. One by one, the aliens stepped forward, entering the ship's darkened interior. As they walked down the glowing corridor, they felt an eerie sense of recognition. This was their ship, but it had changed. The walls were lined with strange markings, symbols that had not been there before. It was as though the ship itself had transformed, as though it had adapted to the new environment it had been left in. The air inside was cool, almost sterile, and it carried a faint scent of something ancient, as though the ship had been waiting in suspended animation for centuries. At the end of the corridor, they reached a massive chamber. The walls were lined with technology that seemed both familiar and foreign, a blend of the aliens' advanced design mixed with something else, something that didn't belong. In the center of the room, surrounded by glowing consoles and pulsing energy fields, was a control panel. The panel was the heart of the ship, the place where their ancestors had once commanded the vessel. The engineer stepped forward, his hands hovering over the panel as he activated it. The consoles came to life, flashing with lights and patterns that seemed to respond to his touch. The ship was waking up, slowly, as though it had been in a deep slumber for centuries. But as the lights flickered on, so did something else, a presence. It was subtle at first, just a faint sensation, like the echo of a memory that had been buried deep within the ship's systems. But the longer they stayed in the chamber, the stronger the feeling became. It was as though they were not alone in the ship. The air grew colder, and a sense of unease crept over them. The engineer's hands paused above the control panel, his senses tingling. Something was wrong. The ship was reacting, but not in the way they expected. It wasn't just responding to their commands. It was aware of them, as if it recognized their presence and was reacting to it, not as an object to be controlled, but as a living entity. One of the aliens, a scientist, approached cautiously. "Is it possible that the ship has become sentient?" he asked, his voice filled with a mixture of curiosity and concern. The others turned to him, unsure how to respond. It was an unsettling thought. Could the ship, after all this time, have evolved into something more than just a vessel? Something more than a tool of their empire? Before anyone could respond, the lights in the chamber flickered again, and the ship's walls began to hum, louder this time, almost as if it were speaking to them. The strange symbols that adorned the walls seemed to glow brighter, and a deep, resonant voice filled the air, though no one could trace its source. "You have returned," the voice said, its tone calm yet filled with an unexplainable authority. "But you are not the same. Time has changed you, as it has changed me. Welcome to the rebirth." The aliens froze. The voice was unmistakable. It was the voice of their ship, but it wasn't just the ship. It was something more, something alive, something that had been waiting for them. The aliens looked at each other, fear and confusion filling their eyes. They had expected to find their lost ship, their home, but what they had discovered was something beyond their understanding. The ship, it seemed, had not only adapted to the passage of time, it had evolved, changing in ways the aliens could not have imagined. And now it was aware of them. A presence, once dormant, had awakened, and it was speaking to them as though it had its own will. Was this the result of the ship's technology, or was there something more, something that had taken hold of the ship during its long years of isolation? "We did not come for a rebirth," the engineer replied, his voice steady but filled with uncertainty. "We came to reclaim what was lost. We came for our ship, for the technology that was left behind." The voice responded, "The ship is no longer just a vessel. It is part of me, and I am part of it. To reclaim it would mean to lose everything you have become. The chamber grew colder, and the lights dimmed as if the ship itself was retreating into the shadows. The aliens stood in stunned silence, trying to process the words that had just been spoken. The ship had transformed, and now it was challenging them, questioning their right to take back what they had lost. The air hummed with tension as the aliens realized the full scope of their situation. They had returned to Earth for one purpose: to reclaim their lost heritage. But now, it seemed as if the ship itself had a different idea. It was no longer just a piece of technology. It had become something much more complex, something that held a power the aliens had not anticipated. And with this power came a question they were not prepared to answer. Were they prepared to accept what the ship had become? Or would they risk everything to reclaim what they had lost, no matter the cost? The tension in the chamber was palpable. The aliens stood frozen, trying to comprehend the weight of what had just been revealed. The ship, once a powerful symbol of their empire, was now something entirely different. It wasn't just a tool of war or a vessel for travel. It had become a living entity, a being that was as much a part of the universe as they were. And it was questioning them. The air felt heavier, thick with uncertainty. The alien engineer's mind raced as he struggled to understand the implications. The voice, resonating from the very walls of the ship, seemed to know their every thought, their every fear. It was as if the ship had not only evolved over time, but had learned, adapted, and now held knowledge far beyond what they could comprehend. "We did not come to seek judgment," the chief engineer said, his voice steady but unsure. "We came to reclaim what was lost, to restore our people's power." The voice replied, calm but firm, "What you seek to reclaim is not merely a vessel of metal and technology. It is part of something greater. It is part of the universe itself. You are not the same as you once were, and neither is the ship." The engineer's thoughts were a whirlwind. What did this mean? Were they still the same beings that had once commanded the ship, or had they too changed over the 30,000 years of their absence? Had their minds and bodies evolved with time, just as the ship had? The words echoed in his mind, filling him with a mixture of awe and fear. But despite the confusion, the engineer felt a strong resolve. They had come this far, traveled across vast distances, and endured the hardships of space travel, for one purpose: to reclaim what was theirs. They could not turn back now. The ship might have changed, but so had they. The universe had not stood still during their long absence, and neither had their enemies. If they were to rise again, they would need to harness this power, no matter what form it had taken. He turned to his crew, their faces filled with uncertainty. They had all heard the ship's voice, felt the presence of something beyond their understanding. But they were warriors, survivors. They had fought battles across the stars, and they knew what it meant to fight for what they believed in. "We must press forward," the engineer declared, his voice filled with determination. "The ship is part of us. It always has been, and we will not leave without it." One of the aliens, a strategist, stepped forward. "But we cannot simply take it. It is not just a ship anymore. It has evolved into something more. We need to understand it. We need to know its purpose." The engineer nodded. "Agreed, but we cannot afford to waste time. We must learn to control it, to awaken its true potential. The universe will not wait for us." The air in the chamber seemed to vibrate with an energy that was almost palpable. The ship's voice, which had gone silent for a moment, spoke once more, its tone softer now, almost as if it were speaking directly to the aliens, rather than just resonating through the walls. "You seek to control me," the ship said, "but control is an illusion. I am part of the greater whole. We are connected, you and I. Your ancestors understood this. They understood that power lies not in control, but in harmony." The words lingered in the air, their meaning sinking deep into the hearts of the aliens. For a moment, there was a sense of peace, as if the ship was offering them a choice, an understanding of the true nature of their mission. But the engineer's thoughts were clouded. Harmony. Was this the answer? Could they really let go of their need for dominance and control? Could they truly embrace something as foreign as harmony? "Let us at least try," the engineer said quietly, his voice carrying a weight of conviction. "Let us see what happens if we listen. We may be able to unlock the ship's power in ways we never imagined." The aliens hesitated for a moment, uncertain, but the call of the ship, its strange and powerful presence, was too compelling to resist. They had come to take back what was theirs. They had come to restore their empire. But now, they were faced with the possibility of something greater, something that transcended their former understanding of power. The engineer stepped forward again, slowly approaching the control panel, his hand trembling slightly. The ship's energy pulsed around him, responding to his presence. He placed his hand on the surface of the panel, feeling its warmth, its power, as though the ship was inviting him to join it in a new kind of unity. The walls of the chamber began to glow once more, the symbols shifting and moving in patterns that were both mesmerizing and unsettling. The ship was alive in a way the aliens had never imagined. The energy in the room intensified, and for a moment, everything seemed to pause, as though time itself had stopped. Then, slowly, the ship's voice spoke again. "You have made your choice. The path ahead is uncertain, but you have chosen to embrace the unknown. You will need more than just strength to succeed. You will need understanding. You will need to trust in the harmony of all things." The words echoed in the chamber, and a new sense of purpose filled the hearts of the aliens. They had always believed in strength, in control. But now, they realized that true power might lie in something entirely different, in understanding, in unity with the ship, and perhaps even with the universe itself. As they stood in the chamber, the future stretched out before them, uncertain, mysterious, and full of potential. They had come to reclaim their lost ship, but now they were faced with the possibility of something even greater. The ship was not just a tool of war. It was a part of the universe, and it was waiting for them to discover its true power. And so, the journey continued into the unknown, where the aliens would have to learn not only to control the ship, but to understand it. The road ahead was unclear, but one thing was certain. The universe had a way of reshaping even the most powerful empires, and the aliens had just begun to understand how it could reshape them. The ship hummed, its energy pulsating in rhythm with the hearts of the aliens. The air felt thick with expectation, as if the very walls of the chamber were holding their breath. The aliens stood together, their once rigid sense of purpose now softened by the realization that their mission had changed. No longer were they merely reclaiming a lost artifact. They were being drawn into a deeper connection with the ship, one that transcended their understanding of power. As the energy around them shifted, a new presence seemed to emerge within the ship. It was as if the ship itself was awakening, its consciousness extending beyond the physical bounds of its hull and reaching out to the aliens. It was subtle at first, like a whisper in the back of their minds, but it soon grew stronger, clearer. "Understand me," the voice spoke again, but this time it was not a command. It was an invitation, an offer. "You have seen only fragments of my essence, but you must learn to see more, to feel more." The alien engineer, who had once been certain of the ship's power and his own command over it, now felt a sense of humility. The ship was not merely a tool. It was a living, breathing entity, and in many ways, it seemed to know them better than they knew themselves. Its presence was vast, like an ocean stretching out endlessly before them. He stepped forward, feeling the energy flow through him. He could sense the ship's history, its ancient origins, and the secrets it had kept hidden for millennia. It was a vessel of unimaginable power, but it was also a vessel of knowledge that had been lost to them, until now. "The ship is not just a machine," the engineer murmured, more to himself than to anyone else. "It's alive. It's been waiting for us to return." One of the other aliens, a scientist, looked toward the engineer, her expression a mixture of awe and confusion. "What do you mean?" The ship's technology is beyond anything we could have imagined. But this feeling, this connection, what is it? The engineer turned to her, his mind racing. The ship's power doesn't lie in its weapons or its engines. It lies in its understanding of the universe. It's a bridge between us and everything we've forgotten. The scientist's eyes widened as the implications of his words sank in. The ship wasn't just a part of their past. It was the key to their future, to something greater than they had ever dared to dream. But what did that mean for them? Could they really embrace this new path, this new way of thinking? Could they let go of everything they had once believed in? As the crew gathered in the chamber, the ship's voice spoke again, this time addressing them all. Your empire was built on strength, but true strength lies in knowledge and connection. You seek to reclaim your past, but it is the future that calls you. Do you accept this path, or will you continue to cling to what is gone? The question hung in the air, heavy and unanswerable. The aliens had come to take back what was theirs, to restore their empire to its former glory. But now they were faced with a choice that went beyond their understanding of power. It was not a question of weapons or domination. It was a question of how they viewed the universe itself. The alien engineer looked around at his crew, their faces a mix of uncertainty and curiosity. They had always believed in the supremacy of their empire, in the strength of their will. But now, that belief was being tested. The ship had shown them that power wasn't just about control. It was about understanding. It was about connection. Perhaps the ship is right, the engineer said, his voice steady. Perhaps the empire we once knew is no longer the empire we need. We've always fought to conquer, to dominate. But what if our true purpose is to connect, to learn, and to grow? There was a long pause as the aliens processed his words. It was difficult for them to imagine a future without conquest, without the strength that had defined their empire for eons. But the ship's presence, its calm, unwavering voice, had planted a seed of doubt in their minds. Could they really abandon everything they had once believed in? One of the aliens, a warrior, spoke up, his voice hesitant but filled with curiosity. But if we abandon our past, what do we have left? If we are not conquerors, then who are we? The engineer turned to him, his eyes filled with a quiet understanding. We are explorers, he said. We are seekers of knowledge. Our past may have been built on conquest, but our future is built on understanding. The ship has shown us that there is more to this universe than we ever imagined. And we can be a part of that, but only if we open ourselves to it. The room fell silent as the crew absorbed his words. There was a sense of weight in the air, as though the very nature of their existence was being redefined. They had come to reclaim their ship, their empire, but now they were being offered something more, something that could change the very course of their future. The ship's voice echoed once more, this time filled with a sense of finality. You have made your choice. You have chosen the path of connection, of knowledge. The universe awaits. The chamber seemed to vibrate with the energy of the ship, its power now in harmony with the will of the aliens. The decision had been made. They would not return to their past, to the empire they once knew. Instead, they would move forward, embracing the unknown and all the possibilities it offered. The ship's lights flickered, and the chamber slowly began to transform. The walls shifted, revealing a new path, a path that led them deeper into the heart of the ship. It was a journey they could never have imagined, one that would take them far beyond the boundaries of their former empire. And as they stepped forward into the unknown, they knew that their lives, indeed, their entire existence, had changed forever. There was no going back. They were no longer conquerors. They were something new, something greater. And their journey was only just beginning. The stars outside the ship's observation window glimmered in the vast emptiness of space, each one a tiny beacon in the endless dark. The ship had long been quiet, but now, a sense of anticipation seemed to hum through the walls. The crew had made their choice, the path of knowledge and exploration stretching out before them like an open book. But they knew that this journey was not without its challenges. The unknown loomed large, both exciting and intimidating. As the aliens walked down the long corridor of the ship, the very air seemed to vibrate with purpose. The walls, once cold and distant, now seemed to pulse with life, as if responding to their presence. The ship, ancient and wise, was guiding them, leading them deeper into its mysteries, revealing secrets that had been hidden for eons. The crew felt the weight of these revelations pressing down on them, but it was not a burden. It was a gift, one that they were only beginning to understand. The alien engineer, who had once believed in the superiority of their empire, now found himself in awe of the ship's power. It was not just the technology that fascinated him, but the depth of its wisdom. As they moved deeper into the ship, the crew began to realize that they were not just discovering new technologies. They were discovering themselves and their place in the universe. The ship's corridors stretched on, seemingly endless, but the crew never tired. Each step felt like a step closer to something greater, something beyond their comprehension. As they reached the heart of the ship, the central chamber, they were greeted by an overwhelming sight. It was as if they had stepped into another world entirely. In the center of the room stood a massive crystalline structure, its surface shimmering with colors that shifted and changed with every movement. The structure was unlike anything the crew had ever seen. Its beauty was matched only by its mystery. It seemed to pulse with energy, a deep, resonant hum that echoed through the room. The crew stood in awe, unable to tear their eyes away from the incredible sight before them. The alien engineer stepped forward, his heart racing with anticipation. The ship had guided them here for a reason, but what that reason was, he could not yet understand. He reached out cautiously, his fingers brushing against the crystal. Immediately, a surge of energy flowed through him, overwhelming his senses. It was as if the ship had unlocked a part of his mind that he never knew existed. A connection that went beyond physical touch. Images and sensations flooded his thoughts. Visions of distant galaxies, of ancient civilizations, of moments in time long past. The engineer gasped as the flood of knowledge overwhelmed him. It was as if the ship was sharing its very essence with him, opening his mind to the vastness of the universe. He saw glimpses of the stars, each one a world unto itself, filled with possibilities. He felt the ebb and flow of cosmic energies, the balance of creation and destruction, and the delicate dance of life that spanned the galaxies. It was a profound experience, one that left him breathless and humbled. The crew watched in silence as the engineer stood there, his body trembling with the force of the revelation. They could see the change in him, the way his eyes seemed to shine with newfound understanding. He had always been the one to lead them, the one who had believed in the might of their empire. But now, he was something different. He was no longer just an engineer. He was a part of something far greater, something beyond the reach of any single empire or individual. As the engineer withdrew his hand from the crystal, the flood of knowledge slowly subsided, leaving him with a sense of peace. He turned to his crew, his voice calm but filled with awe. "We've been looking at the universe through the wrong lens," he said softly. "For so long we believed that power was the key to everything. Control, dominance, strength. But now, I see that it's not power that matters. It's understanding. It's connection. This ship, this journey, it's not just about reclaiming what was lost. It's about becoming part of something bigger, something more meaningful." The crew stood in stunned silence. For the first time, they were beginning to see the truth of his words. The ship had not just offered them a way back to their former empire, it had offered them a way forward, into a future where knowledge and connection were the true sources of power. The realization was both humbling and exhilarating. It was a path that they had never considered, but one that they now knew they could not ignore. One of the younger aliens, a member of the crew who had always been skeptical of the engineer's new perspective, stepped forward. "But what about our empire? What about our people? Can we truly abandon everything we've built?" The engineer turned to him, his eyes filled with understanding. "We don't have to abandon anything," he said gently. "We can take the best of what we've learned, the strength we've gained from our past, and use it to build something new. Our empire was built on the idea of conquest. But what if we can build something better, something that unites rather than divides? We've always believed in the power of force, but now we see that there is a greater power in unity, in understanding. We can still be strong, but in a way that benefits everyone." The young alien looked thoughtful, as though he was weighing the engineer's words against everything he had ever known. Slowly, he nodded, his expression softening. "I see now. This is bigger than us, bigger than our empire." The engineer smiled, feeling a sense of relief wash over him. For the first time in his life, he felt truly at peace with the direction they were heading. The crew had chosen their path, and it was one that would take them far beyond the boundaries of their past. They were no longer conquerors. They were explorers, seeking to understand the universe and their place within it. As the ship's energy hummed around them, the crew turned and made their way deeper into the ship. Each step they took felt like a step closer to their new purpose, their new destiny. The future was still unknown, but for the first time, they were no longer afraid. The ship had shown them the way forward, and they would follow it, wherever it might lead. Together, they moved into the heart of the ship, ready to embrace the knowledge that awaited them. The universe was vast, and the possibilities were endless, and for the first time, they understood that they were not just travelers in space. They were part of something much greater, something that spanned the stars and connected all life in ways they had never imagined.